bear cub locked inside a library. Book return slot. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets of Maplewood, a small town where nothing unusual ever happened. Birds chirped softly in the oak trees that lined the walkway to the old brick library. The air smelled fresh, carrying the scent of dew-covered grass and the faint aroma of coffee from the nearby cafe. Iris Chen pushed her baby stroller along the cobblestone path, her 6-month-old daughter Maya gurgling happily as she watched the world around her with wide, curious eyes. Maya's tiny hands reached out toward the dancing leaves above, her face bright with innocent wonder. "We're almost there, sweetie," Iris whispered, adjusting the pale yellow blanket around Maya's legs. "Mommy needs to return these books, and then we can go to the park." The library stood like a gentle giant at the end of the street, its red brick walls covered in patches of ivy that had turned golden with the approaching autumn. The large wooden doors were still closed, but Iris knew she could use the after-hours book return slot on the side of the building. As they approached the library, Maya began making soft cooing sounds, her head turning toward a rustling in the nearby bushes. Iris paused, listening carefully. The sound was faint, almost like a whimper, but she couldn't quite place it. "Did you hear that too, baby?" she asked, looking down at Maya, who was now sitting up straighter in her stroller, her eyes fixed on something beyond the library's entrance. From the edge of the small forest that bordered the library grounds, a tiny brown shape emerged. It was a bear cub, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, with fluffy fur that caught the morning light. The cub moved hesitantly, sniffing the air as it approached the library building. Iris felt her heart skip a beat. She had heard about bears in the area, but seeing one so close, especially with her baby, made her freeze in place. The cub seemed young, possibly lost, and appeared more curious than threatening as it wandered toward the book return slot. Maya made an excited babbling sound, pointing her tiny finger toward the cub. Her eyes were bright with fascination, showing no fear at all. The cub looked up at the sound, its small dark eyes meeting Maya's gaze for a brief moment. "Shh, Maya," Iris whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need to be very quiet." The cub approached the book return slot, attracted by something Iris couldn't see. There were crumbs scattered near the opening, probably left by someone who had eaten lunch there the day before. The cub began sniffing around the metal slot, its little nose working overtime to investigate the interesting smells. Iris reached for her phone, unsure whether to call animal control or simply wait for the cub to move on. But as she fumbled with her phone, something unexpected happened. The cub, in its eagerness to reach the food scraps, squeezed its head and front paws into the book return slot. The opening was just wide enough for books, but the cub's determination to reach the crumbs drove it forward. In seconds, the cub had wiggled its entire body into the slot, disappearing from view. Then came the sound that made Iris's blood run cold. A panicked whimpering echoed from inside the metal chute, followed by desperate scratching sounds. The cub was stuck. Maya began crying, not her usual fussy cry, but something different, something urgent. Her tiny fists waved in the air as she looked toward the book return slot, as if she understood that something was terribly wrong. "Oh no," Iris breathed, her hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened. "Oh no, no, no." The cub's cries grew louder, echoing through the metal chute with a hollow, desperate sound that made Iris's heart ache. The poor little thing was trapped, probably scared and unable to back out of the narrow space. Maya's cries became more insistent, her whole body trembling with emotion as she reached toward the library building. Tears streamed down her tiny face, but her eyes remained fixed on the book return slot, as if she was trying to communicate something important to her mother. Iris looked around frantically. The street was empty, too early for most people to be out. The library wouldn't open for another hour, and she had no idea how to help the trapped cub. She thought about the mother bear that must be somewhere nearby, probably searching for her missing baby. The scratching sounds from inside the slot grew weaker, and Iris realized with growing panic that the cub might be running out of air, or worse, might injure itself trying to escape. Maya's cries grew softer but more heartbroken, as if she could sense the cub's distress. "What do I do, sweetheart?" Iris asked her daughter, feeling helpless and scared. "What do I do?" Maya looked up at her mother with tear-filled eyes, then back at the book return slot. Her tiny hand reached out again, and she made a sound that Iris had never heard before. It wasn't crying or babbling. It was almost like she was trying to call to the trapped cub. The morning that had started so peacefully had suddenly become a race against time, with a baby's mysterious connection to a trapped wild animal that defied all explanation. Iris pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, her mind racing through her options. Should she call 911? Animal control? The fire department? As she scrolled through her contacts, Maya's unusual behavior became even more pronounced. The baby had stopped crying completely and was now making soft, rhythmic sounds that almost seemed like she was trying to communicate with something. "Ba-ba-ba," Maya whispered, her voice so gentle it was barely audible. "Ba-ba-ba." From inside the book return slot, the cub's panicked scratching suddenly stopped. Iris froze, her finger hovering over the emergency number. Had something happened to the cub? Was it too late? Then, incredibly, a soft whimpering came from inside the slot. But this time it wasn't panicked or desperate. It was almost like the cub was responding to Maya's sounds. The baby immediately brightened, her tears stopping as she continued her gentle babbling toward the trapped animal. "This is impossible," Iris muttered, but she couldn't deny what she was witnessing. Her 6-month-old daughter seemed to be calming a wild bear cub through some kind of communication that made no sense. Maya stretched her tiny arms toward the book return slot, leaning so far forward in her stroller that Iris had to steady her. The baby's face was filled with concern, her eyebrows furrowed in concentration as she continued making soft sounds. Iris decided to call the library's emergency number, hoping someone could help. As the phone rang, she heard footsteps approaching from down the street. An elderly man with a walking cane was making his way toward them, probably heading to the library for when it opened. "Hello?" came a voice through the phone. "Hi, this is an emergency," Iris said quickly. "There's a bear cub stuck in your book return slot, and I don't know what to do." "A what?" The voice sounded confused. "A bear cub. It crawled into the slot and now it's trapped. I can hear it crying inside." The elderly man had reached them now, his weathered face showing concern as he noticed Iris's distress and Maya's unusual behavior. The baby was still making her soft sounds toward the book return slot, completely focused on the trapped cub. "I'm Harold Winters," the man said gently. "I volunteer at the library. What seems to be the problem?" Before Iris could answer, Maya let out a series of sounds that were unlike anything Iris had ever heard from her daughter. They weren't normal baby babbles, but something more complex, almost like she was speaking in a language only she understood. The response from inside the slot was immediate. The cub made a soft chirping sound, different from its earlier panicked cries. Harold's eyes widened as he heard the exchange between the baby and the trapped animal. "My goodness," he whispered, How long has this been going on? Just a few minutes, Iris replied, still holding the phone. But my daughter, she seems to understand that the cub is in trouble. It's like they're talking to each other. Harold approached the book return slot carefully, listening to the sounds coming from inside. The metal chute was about 3 feet deep, designed to protect returned books from weather and theft. But it was never meant to hold a living creature. The maintenance panel, Harold said suddenly. There's a way to open the back of the slot from inside the library. I have keys. Hope surged through Iris's chest. Really? You can get it out? I can try, Harold said, pulling out a large key ring. But first, let me call our animal control officer. He's a friend of mine, and he'll know how to handle this safely. As Harold made his call, Maya continued her strange conversation with the cub. The baby would make a sound, wait for a response from inside the slot, then make another sound. It was as if they were having an actual dialogue. Iris watched in amazement as her daughter's tiny face showed emotions she had never seen before. There was worry, determination, and something that looked almost like love. Maya's whole body was focused on the trapped cub, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Jake's on his way, Harold announced, ending his call. He'll be here in 10 minutes, but he said we should try to keep the cub calm until then. Stress can make animals do dangerous things, even young ones. Maya seems to be doing that already, Iris said, still hardly believing what she was witnessing. The cub had grown quieter, responding to Maya's sounds with soft whimpers that no longer sounded panicked. But Iris could tell the animal was still trapped and probably scared. Every few minutes, there would be a soft scratching sound as the cub tried to move, followed by Maya making reassuring noises. Harold knelt down beside Maya's stroller, his old eyes filled with wonder. In 60 years of working with animals and books, I've never seen anything like this, he said softly. How old is your daughter? 6 months, Iris replied. She's always been unusually aware of her surroundings, but this is something else entirely. Maya turned toward Harold and made a sound that seemed almost like she was trying to explain something to him. Then she pointed toward the book return slot and made her gentle babbling sounds again. The cub responded immediately with a soft chirp. It's like she's translating, Harold mused. Like she understands what the cub needs and she's trying to tell us. Just then, Maya made an urgent sound, different from her previous gentle babbles. The cub's response was equally urgent, a series of whimpers that made Iris's heart race. Something's wrong, she said, moving closer to the slot. The cub sounds more distressed again. Harold pressed his ear to the metal chute. I think it might be having trouble breathing. The space is small, and if it's been in there for a while. Maya began crying again, but these weren't normal baby tears. They were tears of genuine anguish, as if she could feel the cub's suffering. Her tiny body shook with sobs as she reached desperately toward the book return slot. We can't wait for animal control, Iris said, her maternal instincts kicking in. That baby animal is going to suffocate. Harold looked at the key in his hand, then at Maya's tear-streaked face. The baby was looking at him with such pleading eyes that he felt his heart break. The maintenance panel is inside, he said. But if I open the library early, I could get to it. The only problem is I don't know what condition the cub will be in when we open that panel. It might be frightened and try to run, or worse, it might be... He didn't finish the sentence, but Iris understood. The cub might already be too weak to survive. Maya's cries grew more desperate, and she began struggling against her stroller straps as if she wanted to get out and help somehow. Her tiny fists clenched and unclenched as she made sounds that were clearly meant for the trapped cub. The response from inside the slot was getting weaker. The cub's whimpers were becoming fainter, and the scratching sounds had almost stopped completely. "We have to try," Iris said, her voice filled with determination. "My daughter won't forgive me if we don't try everything we can." Harold nodded and headed toward the library entrance. As he unlocked the heavy wooden doors, Maya's behavior became even more extraordinary. She had stopped crying and was now making a series of complex sounds toward the book return slot, as if she was trying to keep the cub conscious through sheer force of will. The cub's responses were barely audible now, just faint whimpers that seemed to fade in and out. But incredibly, it was still responding to Maya's sounds, as if the baby's voice was the only thing keeping it connected to the world outside its metal prison. "Hold on, little one," Harold called back to them as he disappeared into the library. "We're coming to help you." Maya looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed far too wise for a 6-month-old baby. Then she turned back to the book return slot and began what sounded almost like a lullaby, her soft voice carrying a melody that Iris had never heard before. Inside the slot, the cub's breathing became more regular, as if Maya's song was giving it the strength to hold on just a little longer. Iris watched in stunned silence as her daughter continued her mysterious lullaby. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, unlike anything she had ever heard Maya make before. It seemed to come from somewhere deep within the baby, as if she was channeling something ancient and primal. Minutes passed like hours. From inside the library, Iris could hear Harold's footsteps echoing through the building as he searched for the maintenance panel. The sound of keys jingling and doors opening carried through the morning air, but each second felt like an eternity. Maya's lullaby never stopped. Her tiny voice rose and fell in a rhythm that seemed to match the cub's breathing. Whenever the animal's responses grew weaker, Maya would sing a little louder, a little more urgently, and somehow the cub would find the strength to answer back. "How is this possible?" Iris whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter perform what could only be described as a miracle. Suddenly, Maya stopped singing. Her head turned sharply toward the street, her eyes wide with what looked like fear. Iris followed her gaze and felt her blood run cold. At the edge of the small forest, a massive black bear was emerging from the trees. It was enormous, easily 6 feet tall even on all fours, with thick, shiny fur that rippled with muscle as it moved. This had to be the cub's mother, and she was clearly searching for her missing baby. The mother bear lifted her head and sniffed the air, her powerful nose working to catch her cub's scent. When she caught it, her reaction was immediate and terrifying. She let out a roar that shook the leaves on the nearby trees and began moving toward the library with frightening speed. Maya began crying again, but this time her cries were different. They weren't just tears of concern for the trapped cub, but tears of terror as she sensed the approaching danger. The baby's whole body trembled as she pointed toward the approaching bear, her face pale with fear. "Harold!" Iris screamed toward the library. "Harold, hurry! The mother bear is here!" From inside the building, she could hear Harold's voice calling back, but his words were muffled by the walls. The sound of tools clanging and metal scraping suggested he was working frantically to open the maintenance panel. The mother bear was now only 50 yards away, her massive paws thundering against the ground as she approached. Her eyes were wild with protective fury, and Iris realized with growing horror that the bear would see her and Maya as threats to her cub. Maya's cries grew more desperate, and incredibly, the trapped cub seemed to sense its mother's approach. From inside the slot came a series of urgent whimpers, as if the cub was trying to call out to its mother but couldn't make enough noise to be heard clearly. Iris's mind raced. She could run, but Maya was strapped into her stroller and there wasn't time to get her out. She could try to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The bear was moving too fast, and Iris knew that running would only trigger the animal's chase instinct. The mother bear was now close enough that Iris could see her eyes, dark and filled with desperate maternal rage. The animal's focus was entirely on the library building where her cub's scent was strongest, but Iris and Maya were directly in her path. Then something incredible happened. Maya stopped crying abruptly and began making the same soft, rhythmic sounds she had been using to communicate with the cub. But now her sounds were different, more complex, as if she was trying to speak to the approaching mother bear. The massive bear slowed her charge, her head tilting as she heard Maya's strange vocalizations. For a moment, the two looked at each other, the tiny human baby and the enormous wild animal, connected by something that defied all logic and explanation. Maya's sounds grew more urgent, and she pointed toward the book return slot while looking directly at the mother bear. It was as if she was trying to explain what had happened, trying to tell the bear that her cub was trapped and needed help. The mother bear approached slowly now, her massive head lowering as she sniffed around the book return slot. When she heard her cub's faint whimpers coming from inside the metal chute, she let out a sound that was part roar, part whine, filled with anguish and frustration. Maya immediately responded with comforting sounds, the same gentle babbles she had been using to calm the trapped cub. The mother bear looked at her with eyes that seemed almost human in their intelligence and emotion. From inside the library came the sound of metal grinding against metal, followed by Harold's triumphant shout, "I've got it! The panel's opening!" The mother bear's attention snapped toward the building, her protective instincts flaring again. She positioned herself between the library entrance and Maya's stroller, clearly ready to defend against any perceived threat to her cub. But Maya continued her soft vocalizations, and something extraordinary began to happen. The mother bear's aggressive posture slowly relaxed. She looked back and forth between the baby and the library, as if she was beginning to understand that these humans were trying to help, not harm, her cub. Harold's voice called out from inside the building. "The cub is alive. It's weak, but it's breathing. I can see it through the panel, but I need to be very careful getting it out." The mother bear made a sound deep in her throat, a rumbling that wasn't quite a growl, but wasn't friendly either. Maya responded immediately with a series of gentle sounds that somehow conveyed reassurance and comfort. Iris watched in amazement as her daughter seemed to be mediating between the anxious mother bear and the rescue effort happening inside the library. The baby's face was serious, focused, as if she understood the gravity of the situation and her role in keeping everyone calm. Minutes passed in tense silence. The mother bear paced back and forth in front of the book return slot, occasionally sniffing at the opening and making soft whining sounds. Maya continued her gentle babbling, and incredibly the massive bear seemed to find comfort in the baby's voice. From inside the library came the sound of Harold's gentle voice. "Easy now, little one. I'm going to help you out of there. Don't be scared." The trapped cub made a weak sound, and both Maya and the mother bear responded immediately. Maya with her soft babbles, and the mother bear with an encouraging rumble that vibrated through the ground. "I've got it," Harold called out. "The cub is free, but it's very weak. I'm bringing it around to the front entrance." The mother bear immediately moved toward the library's main entrance, her massive body blocking the path. Maya began making urgent sounds, as if she was trying to tell the bear that Harold was a friend, not a threat. The heavy wooden doors of the library creaked open, and Harold appeared, carrying a small, limp bundle of brown fur in his arms. The cub was barely conscious, its tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The mother bear let out a roar that shook the windows of nearby buildings, but she didn't charge. Instead, she approached Harold slowly, her eyes never leaving her cub. Maya's gentle sounds continued, creating a strange soundtrack to this impossible scene. Harold, showing remarkable courage for a man his age, slowly knelt down and placed the cub on the ground between himself and the mother bear. The tiny animal stirred weakly, making soft mewing sounds as it caught its mother's scent. The mother bear immediately began nuzzling her cub, licking its fur and making gentle rumbling sounds. The cub responded by trying to stand, its legs wobbly but determined. Maya clapped her tiny hands together and made happy sounds, as if she was celebrating the reunion. But just as it seemed like the crisis was over, the cub collapsed again. Its breathing became labored, and its eyes began to close. The ordeal in the narrow, airless slot had taken a severe toll on the young animal. The mother bear's anguished cry filled the air, a sound so heartbreaking that it brought tears to both Iris's and Harold's eyes. Maya immediately began crying as well, her tiny body shaking with sobs as she sensed the cub's distress. Harold quickly checked the cub's breathing and pulse. "It's in shock," he said grimly. "We need to get it to a veterinarian immediately, but I don't know if there's time." The mother bear looked at Harold with eyes that seemed to plead for help, then at Maya, as if she somehow understood that these humans had been trying to save her baby. Maya's cries grew more desperate, and she struggled against her stroller straps, reaching toward the unconscious cub with her tiny hands. Iris hesitated for a moment, then made a decision that would have seemed impossible just an hour earlier. She unbuckled Maya from her stroller and carefully lifted her daughter, then slowly approached the mother bear and her dying cub. The massive bear watched every movement, but she didn't threaten or retreat. Instead, she seemed to understand that Maya wanted to help. Iris knelt down just a few feet from the enormous wild animal, holding Maya close to her chest. The baby immediately reached toward the cub, making the same soft, rhythmic sounds she had been using all morning. The cub's eyes fluttered open at the sound of Maya's voice. For a moment, the two babies looked at each other, the human and the bear, connected by something that transcended species and logic. Maya began her lullaby again, the same haunting melody that had kept the cub conscious while it was trapped, and incredibly the cub's breathing began to stabilize. Its eyes stayed open, fixed on Maya's face, as if her voice was an anchor keeping it connected to life. The mother bear watched this impossible scene, her massive head tilted in wonder as she witnessed her cub responding to the human baby's song. But in the distance, the sound of sirens was growing louder. Animal control, the fire department, and probably the police were all heading their way. And Iris realized with growing dread that when they arrived, they would see a dangerous wild bear threatening a human family. They would never understand the miracle that had just taken place, or the bond that had formed between Maya and the bear family. They would only see a threat that needed to be eliminated. The mother bear seemed to sense the approaching danger as well. Her ears perked up at the sound of the sirens, and her protective instincts began to override the strange trust she had placed in these humans. Maya's lullaby grew more urgent, as if she too understood that their time together was running out. The cub tried to lift its head toward her voice, its tiny paws reaching in her direction. In just a few minutes, everything would change. The authorities would arrive, the bears would be taken away, and this extraordinary connection between Maya and the wild animals would be broken forever. Unless something incredible happened to change the course of events that were already set in motion. The sirens grew louder, and Iris could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles turning onto their street. Her heart pounded as she realized the impossible situation they were in. How could she possibly explain to the authorities that her 6-month-old daughter had formed a mystical bond with wild bears? How could she make them understand that the massive mother bear posed no threat as long as Maya was singing? Maya seemed to sense the approaching crisis. Her lullaby took on a more urgent tone, and she reached both her tiny hands toward the weakened cub. The baby animal responded by lifting its head slightly, its dark eyes focusing on Maya's face with what looked like recognition and trust. The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound of the approaching vehicles. Her massive body tensed, and Iris could see the wild animal's protective instincts warring with the strange calm that Maya's presence had created. The bear looked toward the street, then back at her cub, then at Maya, as if she was trying to decide whether to flee or fight. Harold, who had been quietly observing this extraordinary scene, suddenly stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen," he said softly, "I need to tell you something important, something I've never told anyone before." Iris looked at him in confusion, still holding Maya close as her daughter continued her lullaby. "What do you mean?" 50 years ago, when I was about your age, something similar happened to me," Harold said, his voice filled with emotion. "My son Tommy was just 8 months old, and we were camping in the mountains. An injured wolf approached our campsite, and instead of being afraid, Tommy started making sounds just like Maya is doing now." The first emergency vehicle, a fire truck, appeared at the end of the street. Maya's singing became more intense, and the cub made a soft chirping sound in response. The mother bear shifted her weight, her instincts telling her to grab her baby and run, but something kept her rooted in place. "The wolf was dying," Harold continued quickly, "and the rangers said there was nothing they could do. But Tommy sang to that wolf for 3 hours straight, and somehow, impossibly, the animal recovered. The rangers called it a miracle, but I knew it was something more. Something about my son." Iris stared at Harold in shock. "What happened to Tommy?" Harold's eyes filled with tears. He grew up to become a veterinarian, one of the best in the country. He specializes in wildlife rehabilitation, and he still has that same gift. Animals trust him in ways that seem impossible to explain. The fire truck was getting closer, followed by an animal control van and 2 police cars. Maya's lullaby grew more desperate, as if she could sense that their time was running out. The cub tried to stand, its legs shaking with effort, but it was still too weak. "Harold," Iris said urgently, "what are you trying to tell me?" "I'm trying to tell you that your daughter has a gift that appears maybe once in a generation," Harold said. "And I'm trying to tell you that there might be a way to save these bears without the authorities taking them away." The mother bear let out a low rumble, her eyes fixed on the approaching vehicles. She took a step back, clearly preparing to grab her cub and flee into the forest. But the cub was too weak to run, and they both knew it wouldn't survive a hasty retreat through the wilderness. Maya's singing suddenly changed. Instead of the gentle lullaby, she began making a series of complex sounds that seemed almost like words. The mother bear immediately responded with her own vocalizations, and for a moment, it truly seemed like they were having a conversation. "She's telling the mother to trust us," Harold whispered in amazement. "I've seen this before, but never at this level. Your daughter isn't just calming these animals. She's actually communicating with them." The first responders were now less than a block away. Iris could see the grim faces of the animal control officers through their van's windshield, and she knew they would see the situation as a clear threat. A wild bear with her cub near humans would be handled with tranquilizer guns at best and lethal force at worst. "There's something else," Harold said quickly. "My son runs a wildlife sanctuary about 20 miles from here. If we could somehow get these bears there, they would be safe. The mother could raise her cub in a protected environment, and Maya could—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Iris understood. Maya could continue whatever incredible connection she had formed with these animals. The emergency vehicles pulled up to the library, their sirens finally going silent, but their lights still flashing. Men and women in uniform began climbing out, their equipment ready for what they clearly expected to be a dangerous wildlife encounter. Maya's sounds became almost frantic, and the mother bear responded with increasingly agitated rumbles. The cub, sensing its mother's distress, tried once again to stand but collapsed back onto the ground. "Ma'am, step away from the bear immediately," shouted the lead animal control officer, a stern-faced woman with a tranquilizer gun already in her hands. "Bring your baby toward the vehicles now." Iris looked down at Maya, who was still singing to the cub, her tiny face filled with determination and love. How could she abandon these animals now, when her daughter had worked so hard to save them? "I said step away from the bear," the officer shouted again, raising her weapon. The mother bear saw the gun and let out a roar that echoed off the library walls. She positioned herself protectively over her cub, her massive claws digging into the ground as she prepared to defend her baby with her life. But Maya did something that shocked everyone present. She stopped singing and let out a sharp cry, not of fear, but of command. The sound was unlike anything any of them had ever heard from a human baby, carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 6 months of life. The mother bear immediately stopped roaring and looked at Maya. The cub opened its eyes and made a weak chirping sound. Even the emergency responders paused, their weapons lowering slightly as they tried to process what they had just witnessed. In that moment of silence, Harold stepped forward with his hands raised. "Officer Martinez," he called to the lead animal control officer, "I know this looks dangerous, but I need you to listen to me for just 1 minute." The woman kept her gun trained on the mother bear but nodded for him to continue. "This cub was trapped in our book return slot for over an hour," Harold explained. "It was dying when we rescued it, and the only thing keeping it alive is this baby's voice. I know it sounds impossible, but this child has a gift that I've only seen once before in my lifetime." Officer Martinez looked skeptical. "Mr. Winters, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we have protocols. Wild bears near civilians is a code red situation. I need that family away from those animals now." Maya began singing again, but this time her lullaby included sounds directed at the emergency responders. The melody was so hauntingly beautiful that several of the officers found themselves lowering their weapons without realizing it. The cub responded to Maya's voice by lifting its head and making soft chirping sounds. Incredibly, it managed to get its front paws underneath itself and pushed up into a sitting position, something it hadn't been able to do since being rescued from the slot. "Look at that," whispered one of the firefighters. "The cub is getting stronger." Officer Martinez studied the scene with professional skepticism, but even she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The mother bear was completely calm, the cub was showing signs of recovery, and the human baby seemed to be orchestrating the entire situation with her impossible song. "My son runs the Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary," Harold said quickly, sensing an opportunity. "If we could transport these bears there, they would be safe. The cub would get proper medical care, and this remarkable connection between the child and the animals could be studied properly." "That's highly irregular," Officer Martinez replied, but her voice had lost some of its authority. Maya's singing grew more complex, and she began making gestures with her tiny hands. The mother bear responded by gently nuzzling her cub, encouraging it to stand. With tremendous effort, the baby animal managed to get to its feet, though it swayed unsteadily. "Radio Dr. Winters at the sanctuary," Harold urged. "Tell him his father is requesting emergency assistance with 2 bears and a very special child." As Officer Martinez hesitated, something unexpected happened. More people began arriving at the scene, drawn by the emergency vehicles and the incredible story that was already spreading through the small town's network of early risers and dog walkers. An elderly woman approached the police barricade that was being set up. "Officer, I saw what happened," she called out. "That baby saved the bear cub's life. I was walking my dog when I heard the singing. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." Soon, more witnesses began arriving. A jogger who had seen the mother bear emerge from the forest. A cafe owner who had watched the rescue through his window. A mail carrier who had observed Maya calming the massive wild animal with nothing but her voice. "This isn't a dangerous wildlife encounter," one of the witnesses told Officer Martinez. "This is a miracle." Maya continued her lullaby, and the cub took its first wobbly steps toward her voice. The mother bear watched carefully, ready to catch her baby if it fell, but allowing it to move closer to the human child who had saved its life. Officer Martinez looked around at the growing crowd, at the calm bears, at the singing baby, and at Harold's pleading face. She had been trained to handle dangerous situations, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. She raised her radio to her lips. "Dispatch, this is Martinez at the library. I need you to contact Dr. Tommy Winters at Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary. Tell him we have a situation that requires his immediate expertise." As they waited for the response, Maya's song took on a different quality. It became softer, more reassuring, as if she was telling everyone present that everything was going to be all right. The cub managed to take several more steps, growing stronger with each note of the baby's lullaby. But even as hope began to build, Iris noticed something troubling. Maya's face was growing pale, and her singing, while still beautiful, seemed to be taking a tremendous toll on her tiny body. The baby's eyes were beginning to look exhausted, as if channeling this incredible gift was draining her life force. Harold noticed it too. "She can't keep this up much longer," he said quietly to Iris. "Whatever she's doing, it's using more energy than a baby her age should have." The radio crackled to life. "Doctor, Winters is en route," came the dispatcher's voice. "ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Iris looked down at her daughter, who was still singing despite her obvious exhaustion. Could Maya hold on that long? And what would happen to the bears if she couldn't? As if sensing her mother's worry, Maya's lullaby began to waver. Her tiny voice, which had been strong and clear throughout the entire ordeal, started to crack with fatigue. The cub immediately noticed the change and let out a concerned whimper, taking unsteady steps back toward Maya as if trying to offer comfort in return. The mother bear sensed the shift as well. Her massive head turned toward Maya, and she made a soft rumbling sound that was completely different from her earlier protective growls. It was gentle, almost grateful, as if she understood that the human baby was sacrificing her own strength to save her cub. Iris felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's incredible determination. Maya's eyes were beginning to flutter with exhaustion, but she continued singing, her tiny hands still reaching toward the bear cub that had somehow become the most important thing in her world. "She's pushing herself too hard," Harold said, his voice filled with worry. "I've seen this before with my son. The gift takes everything they have to give, and more." Officer Martinez, who had been maintaining her professional distance, found herself stepping closer to the extraordinary scene. "Is there anything we can do to help her?" she asked, her stern demeanor softening as she watched the baby's struggle. "Talk to her," Harold suggested. "Let her know she's not alone in this. Sometimes that's all they need to find a little more strength." Iris knelt down closer to Maya, still keeping a respectful distance from the mother bear. "I'm here, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mommy's here, and you're doing something amazing. The baby bear is getting better because of you." Maya's eyes focused on her mother's face for a moment, and her lullaby grew slightly stronger. The cub responded by standing more steadily, its breathing becoming more regular as Maya's song filled the air around them. But then something unexpected happened that made everyone's breath catch in their throats. A second bear emerged from the forest. This one was even larger than the mother bear, with dark brown fur that was almost black and massive shoulders that spoke of incredible strength. The crowd of onlookers gasped and began backing away, but Harold held up his hand for calm. "That's the father," he said quietly. "Male bears usually don't stay with their families, but something extraordinary must have brought him here." The male bear approached slowly, his huge head swiveling as he took in the scene. His eyes focused on his mate, then his cub, then on the tiny human baby who was still singing despite her exhaustion. When his gaze settled on Maya, something remarkable happened. The massive bear sat down. He simply sat on his haunches like an enormous dog and listened to Maya's lullaby. His presence seemed to give strength to both the mother bear and the cub, but more importantly, it seemed to give strength to Maya as well. The baby's song grew clearer and more beautiful, as if the arrival of the entire bear family had somehow completed a circuit of energy that had been building all morning. Maya's color returned to her cheeks, and her exhaustion seemed to lift like a cloud being pushed away by the wind. Officer Martinez was now completely focused on her radio, trying to explain the developing situation to her supervisors. "No, sir, you don't understand. There are now 3 bears, but they're completely calm. The baby is still singing to them, and somehow that seems to be keeping everyone safe." The dispatcher's voice crackled back with obvious disbelief. "3 bears? Martinez, I'm sending backup immediately." "No," Officer Martinez said quickly. "I mean negative on the backup. The situation is under control. Repeat, situation is under control." Harold moved closer to Officer Martinez. "The more people you bring here, the more unstable this becomes," he warned. "These bears are responding to something they sense in this child, but if too many strangers arrive with guns and tranquilizers, their protective instincts will override everything else." As if to prove his point, the male bear's ears twitched at the sound of more sirens in the distance. His massive body tensed, and he let out a low rumble that made the ground vibrate. The mother bear immediately moved closer to her cub, and Maya's singing became more urgent. "Call off the backup," Harold urged. "Dr. Winters will be here soon, and he'll know how to handle this properly." Officer Martinez made the difficult decision to trust the elderly librarian. She keyed her radio again. "Dispatch, cancel additional units. Repeat, cancel additional units. We're waiting for the wildlife expert." The crowd of witnesses had grown to nearly 30 people, all maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly fascinated by what they were witnessing. Many had their phones out, recording Maya's incredible lullaby and the bear's peaceful response to her song. An older woman approached Iris cautiously. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the university. I'm not related, just happen to share the same last name. I specialize in animal behavior, and I've never seen anything like this." Iris looked up at the woman gratefully. "Can you tell me what's happening to my daughter? Is this hurting her somehow?" Dr. Chen observed Maya carefully, noting the baby's focused expression and the rhythmic way she moved her hands while singing. "I don't think it's hurting her," she said thoughtfully. "But it's certainly using abilities that we don't fully understand. Has she ever shown signs of unusual sensitivity to animals before?" "Not like this," Iris replied. "She's always been aware of her surroundings, but today is completely different. The cub had now moved close enough to Maya that it was sitting just a few feet away from her stroller. The mother bear watched carefully but didn't interfere, as if she trusted the human baby completely. The male bear remained seated, his massive presence creating a protective circle around his family and the singing child. Maya's lullaby began to include new sounds, almost like she was trying to teach the cub something. The young bear responded with soft chirps and clicks, and incredibly, it seemed like they were engaging in a kind of lesson. "Look at that," Dr. Chen whispered in amazement. "She's not just calming them or healing them. She's actually teaching the cub something. But what could a 6-month-old human baby possibly teach a bear?" The answer came in the form of the cub's behavior. The young animal began moving in a specific pattern, walking in a small circle around Maya's stroller while making rhythmic sounds that matched her lullaby. It was like a dance, ancient and primal, that spoke to something deeper than instinct. Harold's eyes widened with recognition. "My son told me about this," he said quietly. "He said that some children with the gift don't just communicate with animals. They help them remember things that their species has forgotten. Old knowledge, old connections to the world that used to exist before humans and animals became separated." The male bear stood up and joined his cub in the circular dance, his massive paws moving with surprising grace as he followed the pattern his offspring had learned from Maya's song. The mother bear watched for a moment. Then she too began to move, creating a larger circle around her family and the human baby. Maya's lullaby reached a crescendo, and for a moment everyone present felt something shift in the air around them. It was as if the invisible barriers between species had dissolved, leaving only the pure connection of life to life, heart to heart. Dr. Chen was frantically taking notes on her phone. "This is unprecedented," she murmured. "I need to document everything. This could change our entire understanding of interspecies communication." But Maya's strength was still limited. As beautiful as the moment was, Iris could see her daughter beginning to tire again. The baby's eyelids were growing heavy, and her lullaby was becoming softer and more intermittent. The bears sensed the change immediately. The cub moved closer to Maya, its tiny nose almost touching her hand as it made soft, encouraging sounds. The mother bear rumbled gently, and the male bear's deep voice joined in a harmony that seemed to give Maya the strength to continue. Just then, a new vehicle pulled up to the scene. It was a white van with Riverside Wildlife Sanctuary painted on the side. A tall man with kind eyes and graying hair stepped out, carrying a medical bag and moving with the confident calm of someone who had spent his life working with animals. "Dad?" he called to Harold as he approached. "I got here as fast as I could. Where's the child with the gift?" Harold pointed to Maya, who was now being supported in a circle of protective bears, her tiny voice still carrying the lullaby that had saved a life and brought together two species in a way that defied all explanation. Dr. Tommy Winters stopped in his tracks when he saw the scene. His professional composure cracked, and his eyes filled with tears as he witnessed something he had only experienced once before, 50 years ago, when he was the baby with the impossible gift. "Hello, little one," he said softly to Maya, approaching slowly so as not to disturb the bears. "I know exactly what you're going through, and I'm here to help you and your new friends." Maya's lullaby wavered as she looked at Dr. Winters, and for the first time all morning she smiled. It was as if she recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood the incredible burden and joy of her gift. The bears seemed to sense it too, their protective circle expanding to include the veterinarian who had come to help. But as Dr. Winters knelt down to examine the cub, Maya's song suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. For hours, her lullaby had been the soundtrack to this miraculous encounter. and now the absence of her voice felt like the world holding its breath. The cub immediately looked around in confusion, its strength seeming to ebb without Maya's song to sustain it. The mother bear made an anxious sound, and the male bear shifted restlessly, as if some essential element had been removed from their world. Maya's eyes had closed, and her tiny body had gone limp in Iris's arms. The exhaustion had finally caught up with her, and she had fallen into a deep sleep that looked disturbingly like something more serious. "Is she okay?" Iris asked frantically, checking her daughter's breathing and pulse. Dr. Winters gently examined Maya, his experienced hands checking her vital signs. "She's alive, but she's completely drained," he said. "Using the gift at this level takes everything a child has. She needs rest, immediate medical attention, and—" He paused, looking at the three bears who were now showing signs of distress without Maya's calming presence. "And these bears need her to wake up soon, or we might lose the cub after all." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Without Maya's song, the cub was already beginning to wobble on its feet. The mother bear moved closer to her baby, nuzzling it desperately, but the young animal's breathing was becoming shallow again. Dr. Winters worked quickly, checking the cub's vitals while keeping one eye on Maya's unconscious form. "The connection goes both ways," he explained to Iris. "She gave the cub her life force to keep it alive, and now they're bonded in a way that medical science can't explain." Iris held her daughter tighter, tears streaming down her face. "What can we do? How do we wake her up?" "Sometimes," Dr. Winters said gently, "the animals can give back what they received, but it has to be their choice." The mother bear seemed to understand his words. She approached Maya slowly, her massive head lowering until her nose was inches from the sleeping baby's face. Then, incredibly, she began to hum. It was a sound none of them had ever heard before, a deep, melodious rumble that seemed to come from the very soul of the wilderness itself. The male bear joined in, his voice creating a harmony that resonated through the ground and into everyone's bones. Maya's eyelids fluttered. The cub, sensing what was happening, struggled to its feet and added its tiny voice to the chorus. The three bears sang to Maya the same way she had sung to them, offering their strength, their wildness, their ancient connection to the earth. Maya's eyes opened slowly, focusing first on the bears surrounding her, then on her mother's worried face. A smile spread across her tiny features, and she made a soft sound that was both human and something more. The cub immediately perked up, its strength returning as Maya's consciousness returned. The mother bear's humming grew more joyful, and the male bear's deep voice became a celebration rather than a plea. Dr. Winters stood back in amazement. In 50 years of working with gifted children and wild animals, I've never seen the energy flow reversed like that. These bears just saved her life the same way she saved theirs. Officer Martinez, who had been quietly observing this impossible scene, finally lowered her radio completely. "I don't know how I'm going to write this report," she said, shaking her head in wonder. Maya sat up in her mother's arms and reached toward the cub, making her gentle sounds again. But this time, her lullaby was different. It wasn't urgent or desperate, it was peaceful, complete, like a song that had finally found its ending. The cub responded with happy chirps, dancing in a small circle before returning to its parents. The mother bear nuzzled her baby one last time, then looked at Maya with eyes that held unmistakable gratitude. The male bear rose to his full impressive height and let out a roar that wasn't threatening, but triumphant. "They're saying goodbye," Dr. Winters translated. "The cub is strong enough now to return to the wild, and they know Maya needs to rest." As if choreographed by some ancient understanding, the three bears began walking back toward the forest. the cub looked back once, making a sound that could only be described as "thank you" in the universal language that Maya had taught them all to speak. Maya waved her tiny hand and sang one last perfect note that seemed to bless their departure and promise that their connection would never truly be broken. The crowd of witnesses watched in reverent silence as the bear family disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the memory of a miracle and a baby whose gift had bridged two worlds. Iris looked down at her daughter, who was now babbling happily as if she had simply had an interesting morning at the library. "Will she remember any of this?" she asked Dr. Winters. "She'll remember the love," he replied. "That's what the gift is really about. Not communication or healing, but love so pure it transcends every barrier we think exists between living things." Harold wiped tears from his eyes and smiled at Maya. "My grandson is going to love meeting you someday," he said. "He has the gift, too, and he's been waiting his whole life to find someone else who understands." As the emergency vehicles began to pack up and the crowd slowly dispersed, Maya looked up at the morning sky and made one final sound. It was barely a whisper, but everyone heard it clearly. A lullaby for the whole world, sung by a baby who had reminded them all that love is the only language that truly matters. The library book return slot would be repaired and reinforced, but it would never be quite the same. Sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist hung low over the forest, people swore they could still hear the echo of a baby's song and the gentle response of wild voices calling back. Maya Chen had saved more than a bear cub that day. She had saved the memory of what humans and animals could be to each other when fear was replaced by love, when differences were bridged by understanding, and when a child's pure heart could work miracles that adults had forgotten were possible. And in the growing file of Dr. Tommy Winters' research on children with extraordinary gifts, a new chapter began with a simple note. "Today, I witnessed something that gives me hope for the future of our world. Love, it seems, truly can conquer all." The story of the baby who sang to bears became legend in Maplewood, passed down through generations as proof that miracles still happen when we remember how to listen with our hearts instead of our fears. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the trees behind the library, you can still hear an echo of that magical lullaby that once united two species in a song of hope, healing, and impossible love.